Welcome to Veiled Narrative Stories, where emotions meet destiny and love writes its own fate. Today's story is a twist of fate, a moment of magic, and a love that began with a mistake. The late afternoon sun draped the London skyline in gold as Amara Khan hurried through the glass doors of the Rosemont Hotel. The sound of violins floated through the air, and laughter echoed from the grand ballroom. Her heels clicked on marble floors as she adjusted the strap of her silver clutch, muttering to herself, "I'm late. Rita's going to kill me." But fate had already decided to play its trick. Following the scent of roses and the soft hum of classical music, Amara pushed open the tall white doors and walked straight into a scene pulled out of a dream. The hall glittered with chandeliers that shimmered like falling stars. Hundreds of guests turned their heads, their murmurs soft and curious. The bride's entrance, they thought. At that moment Amara froze. The decorations, the faces, the lavish setting, none of it looked familiar. She frowned, glancing around, but before she could step back, a deep, commanding voice echoed across the aisle. "There she is." Her breath caught. The crowd parted slightly as a man in a black tuxedo walked toward her. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the calm confidence of someone who owned the world. His hair was slicked back perfectly, his eyes a stormy blue that seemed to see right through her. His name, though she didn't yet know it, was Alexander Steele, heir to one of Europe's most powerful business empires. As he reached her, the world seemed to dim around them. His gaze softened, as though he had been waiting for her forever. "You came," he whispered, voice low enough for only her to hear. "I thought you wouldn't." Amara blinked, panic rising. I think there's a mistake." But he had already taken her hand. His grip was warm, steady, and oddly reassuring. The priest smiled, the guests clapped, and Amara found herself swept forward toward the altar, her protests drowned by the sea of applause. Her heart thundered against her ribs. She tried to speak again, but every time she looked up at him, that composed face, that slight smile curving his lips, her words tangled somewhere between fear and fascination. The ceremony began. The officiant's voice echoed in the vast hall, words about love, destiny, and forever blending into music. Amara stood beside Alexander, barely breathing. When he looked down at her, his eyes weren't cold or arrogant like she expected from a billionaire. They were soft, almost vulnerable, as if he was looking at something precious. And she couldn't look away. Her mind screamed that she should stop this madness. That this wasn't her cousin's wedding, that she didn't even know this man. But her heart whispered something else. There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled her in like the tide. Then came the moment. "You may kiss the bride." The world spun. Amara's eyes widened. She opened her mouth to speak, but Alexander stepped closer. For a heartbeat, the distance between them disappeared, his breath mingling with hers. The room fell silent, anticipation thick in the air, and before she could stop it, his lips brushed her forehead. Not a kiss of passion, but one of quiet reverence. "You're trembling," he said softly. "Don't be afraid, it's just us now." Her pulse raced. The moment felt too intimate, too real, like something written in the stars long before either of them arrived at that ballroom. When the ceremony ended, Amara finally broke free, her voice shaking. "Listen, this is a mistake. I'm not who you think I am." Alexander's brows furrowed slightly, confusion flickering across his perfect features. "What do you mean?" "I came for my cousin's wedding," she stammered. "Hall B, not Hall AI. This isn't." But even as she spoke, he didn't let go of her hand. He looked at her, really looked, as though every word she said only deepened the mystery. And then, instead of anger, a slow, amused smile curved his lips. "So fate brought you here by accident," he murmured. "Or maybe fate just corrected one." Before Amara could reply, the cameras flashed again. The guests surrounded them, congratulating, laughing, and toasting to their love. Alexander leaned close, his voice a whisper against her ear, smooth and dangerous. "You can walk away now if you want, but something tells me you won't." Her breath hitched. He was right. Because even as she turned to leave, something inside her, something wild and unexplainable, told her this mistake wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of everything. And as she walked out of the glittering ballroom, her heart still racing, Alexander watched her go, the ghost of a smile lingering on his lips. He didn't know who she was. But he knew one thing for certain. He'd just found the woman he wasn't supposed to meet, and he wasn't going to let her disappear. The following morning, Sunlight slipped softly through the cream curtains of Amara's tiny apartment, scattering gold over her face. But the light couldn't chase away the whirlwind of the previous night. She sat at her small wooden dining table, sipping cold coffee, staring blankly at her phone screen. Dozens of messages, headlines, and even a few blurry photos. Mystery bride stuns at billionaire wedding. Her heart skipped a beat. Every image was of her. Her shocked face, her trembling hands, the billionaire's eyes locked on hers as if she were the only person in the room. "Oh my God," she whispered, pressing her fingers to her temples. "What have I done?" Before she could spiral further, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hesitant, she answered. "Miss Khan." The voice was deep, calm, unmistakable. "Alexander Steele." Her pulse raced. How did you?" "I find people when I want to," he interrupted smoothly. "And I want to see you?" And Amara stood from her chair, every nerve alive. "Look, Mr. Steele, about last night." "I know," he said quietly. "You weren't supposed to be there." Relief and embarrassment flooded her at once. Finally, "Yes, I was just, but," he continued, his tone softening, "I also know that I've never seen anyone look at me the way you did, and I can't stop thinking about it." Amara froze. His words hit her like a gentle storm. The way he spoke, slow, deliberate, sincere, made her heart flutter despite her best intentions. "I wasn't looking at you," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "I was panicking." He chuckled. "Then panic looks beautiful on you." Her breath caught. It was absurd, ridiculous, and yet something about him drew her in, like silk brushing against her soul. Before she could respond, he added, "Dinner, the Savoy Hotel, 7 p.m. I'll send a car." The line clicked off. For hours she tried to convince herself not to go. He was a billionaire, she was no one. A freelance designer who could barely afford rent. Their worlds weren't just different, they were galaxies apart. But as evening fell, curiosity, nerves, and something deeper compelled her to stand before her mirror, wearing the only elegant dress she owned, navy blue, soft and graceful, with a neckline that shimmered when the light caught it. When the black car pulled up outside, she almost turned away. But the driver opened the door, smiled, and said, "Mr. Steele is waiting." Inside the Savoy, candlelight danced across crystal glasses. The scent of roses lingered in the air. And at the center table, dressed in black once again, sat Alexander. Composed, magnetic, eyes that pulled her in the moment they met. "You came," he said softly, rising to greet her. "I almost didn't," she confessed, taking a seat across from him. "That would have been a tragedy," he murmured. For a while, silence spoke louder than words. Their conversation began cautious, small talk about art, work, and travel. But it gradually flowed into something real. He told her about the expectations he never asked for, the life that glittered on the outside but felt empty within. "I wasn't supposed to marry her," he admitted, his voice carrying both pain and truth. "It was an arrangement. Business. I went through with it because I was tired of fighting." Amara looked at him, her heart softening. Beneath the power, the fame, the perfection, he was human. Lonely, even. "Then why didn't you stop it?" she asked gently. He smiled faintly. "Because until you walked in, I thought there was nothing left worth fighting for." Her breath hitched. The room seemed to fade. The music, the people, the clinking glasses, until it was just the two of them, suspended in a world that wasn't supposed to exist. "You're confusing gratitude with emotion," she whispered, though her pulse betrayed her. "I know the difference," he replied. "And what I feel isn't confusion." He leaned forward, his gaze burning through her hesitation. "You changed something in me, Amara. You walked in by accident, but maybe you were meant to." She didn't know what to say. Her heart felt heavy, full, trembling all at once. It wasn't possible. Not like this, not so soon. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something no amount of wealth could buy: sincerity. The night stretched on, soft and endless. When they finally stepped outside, rain had begun to fall, gentle silver droplets glistening under the city lights. Without a word, Alexander slipped off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "You'll catch a cold," he said. She smiled faintly. "You're impossible. And you," he murmured, brushing a raindrop from her cheek, hair unforgettable. For a heartbeat, they stood close enough to feel the warmth of each other's breath. The world felt impossibly quiet, the rain whispering promises neither dared to voice. Then, softly, she said, "This isn't real. It can't be." He looked at her, calm, steady, certain. "Then let me prove that it is." The rain fell harder, the city lights blurred into gold and silver, and Amara knew, no matter how much she tried to deny it, something had begun between them. Something dangerous. Something beautiful. She had walked into the wrong wedding, but somehow she had stepped into the right story. It had been 10 days since that unforgettable evening at the Savoy. 10 days since Amara had sworn she wouldn't see Alexander Steele again. She told herself he belonged to another world, a world of black tie galas, private jets, and boardrooms in glass towers. She was an ordinary designer, struggling to meet deadlines in her cramped apartment, surrounded by paintbrushes and dreams she couldn't afford. And yet, every time her phone buzzed, her heart leaped, hoping it was him. He didn't text often, but when he did, it was never casual. I passed by the flower market today. They didn't have the white lilies you love. You once said you liked rain. Step outside. It's beautiful tonight. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the way he wrote them, calm, confident, certain. Each message felt like a thread weaving him quietly into her everyday life. But she resisted. She had to. Men like him didn't fall in love. They collected. Then one Friday afternoon, she walked out of her studio to find a sleek black car waiting by the curb. The chauffeur stepped forward and handed her a white envelope sealed with wax. Inside, a handwritten note, one evening. No expectations. Just truth. Her breath caught. It wasn't arrogance, it was an invitation, simple and honest. Against every logical thought, she found herself saying yes. That evening, she arrived at a place that could have been pulled from a dream. A private garden atop the steel tower, overlooking the glittering skyline of London. The air smelled of roses and rain. Strings of golden fairy lights wound around marble pillars, and a table for two stood beneath a canopy of white orchids. Alexander stood at the far end, his back to her, staring at the horizon. When he turned, the sight made her heart falter. Dark suit, faint smile, and eyes that looked softer tonight. "I was afraid you wouldn't come," he said. "I almost didn't," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Then I would have waited anyway." Those words simple, but disarming. Dinner passed like a blur, laughter, stories, quiet moments that felt strangely intimate. He told her about his late mother who loved painting, his father who measured life in profits, and how he had once wanted to become a writer before business swallowed him whole. "You don't act like a billionaire," she teased lightly. He smiled. "And you don't act like someone who should have walked into the wrong wedding." Their laughter faded into silence, heavy and electric. The city lights flickered below them, and the air between them grew warm, charged with something neither dared to name. When she tried to speak, he reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Do you know what I thought that day?" he asked. "When you walked in?" She shook her head. "I thought, there you are." Her heart skipped. "You thought I was your bride." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not the one everyone expected, but the one my heart recognized." Amara looked away, struggling to breathe. "Alexander, you barely know me, then let me," he whispered. And before she could retreat, he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a soft, husky tone. "You think I'm chasing you out of curiosity, but I'm chasing peace, and somehow you're where I find it." Her eyes met his, and the world around them dissolved. His scent, sandalwood, rain, and something darkly masculine, wrapped around her like a secret. "I don't belong in your world," she murmured. He smiled. "Then I'll build a new one." For a long moment, they just stood there, inches apart, the city beneath them, stars above, hearts racing in the quiet in between. And then, lightning flashed in the distance, a storm rolling in. He took her hand, strong, steady, unyielding, and led her beneath the canopy as rain began to fall. "See," he said, his voice low. "Even the sky remembers you love the rain." She laughed through the drizzle, her hair clinging to her face. "You're impossible. And you're unforgettable." The rain poured harder, soaking through their clothes. She tried to step back, but he caught her wrist gently, his touch careful, reverent. "Don't run," he said. "Not tonight." Her breath trembled. "And what happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," he said, looking deep into her eyes, "I'll still be here." And with that, he pulled her close. Not a desperate embrace, but one of quiet longing. Their foreheads touched, breaths mingling, hearts sensing to the rhythm of the rain. It wasn't a kiss, not yet. It was a promise suspended in air. When she finally left that night, drenched and breathless, he didn't stop her. He only whispered, "You'll come back." And as she stepped into the elevator, heart hammering, she knew he was right. Because somewhere between mistake and fate, something had awakened, a connection that refused to be silenced. Alexander Steele, the man the world called untouchable, had begun to fall. And Amara Khan, the girl who never believed in fairy tales, was starting to feel what it meant to be chosen. She had walked into his world by accident. Now, she was trapped in his gravity, and part of her didn't want to escape. The nights that followed were quieter, but not peaceful. Amara's heart was at war with her mind. Every time she tried to pull away from Alexander Steele, something stronger kept pulling her back. The sound of his voice, the way he said her name, the look in his eyes that made her forget how to breathe. But one evening changed everything. She had been working late at her studio when she noticed a small envelope slipped under her door. The handwriting was unmistakable, bold, elegant, confident. "Meet me where the city touches the sky." Her pulse quickened. She knew exactly where that was. The rooftop garden of Steel Tower, the place where laughter and rain had once intertwined their souls. When she arrived, the city glowed beneath her feet. But this time Alexander wasn't smiling. He stood by the glass railing, his expression carved in shadow. A light breeze played with his hair, and his usual calm eyes carried something heavier. Guilt. "You look like the man I don't recognize," she said softly. He turned slowly, his gaze meeting hers. "Then maybe it's time you saw all of me." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded paper, and handed it to her. "It's the contract for my arranged marriage." Amara froze. It was supposed to be a merger between two families. He continued quietly. "Steele Enterprises and Crawford Holdings. My father's condition for transferring the company to me." She read the words, each one cutting deeper. "So the wedding, the one I walked into, was supposed to bind me to a woman I didn't love." His jaw clenched. "A woman who wanted my empire, not my heart." Amara's throat tightened. "And I ruined that." He took a step closer. "You saved me from it." She shook her head. "No, Alexander, you don't understand. You think fate sent me to rescue you. But what if it's just another mistake?" His eyes softened. "Mistakes don't feel like this." He reached out, brushing his fingers against her cheek. His touch was careful, reverent, like he was afraid she'd vanish if he pressed too hard. "You've been inside my head since the day you appeared," he whispered. "Every sound, every silence, every heartbeat, it all comes back to you." Her chest ached. "You think this can work? You with your world of glass towers and private islands, and me, with my rent due every week." He smiled faintly. "Money builds walls, Amara. You broke mine." For a moment they stood there, the hum of the city beneath them, the truth suspended between their breaths. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But the ache of reality was cruel. "Alexander," she whispered, stepping back, "your world isn't meant for people like me." He caught her wrist gently. "Then tell me, who decides that?" Tears glistened in her eyes. "The world does." "Then I'll change the world." The words left his lips like a vow. His hand slid from her wrist to her fingers, holding her as if anchoring himself. "I've spent my life buying everything I wanted. Companies, influence, control. But the one thing I can't buy is you." She tried to speak, but emotion strangled her voice. "Don't you see?" he said, voice breaking with rare vulnerability. "You're the first thing that ever felt real." The rooftop fell silent. Somewhere below, the city pulsed with life, but up here it was just them, two souls standing on the edge of love and ruin. Amara looked up at him, her heart trembling. "What about your father? The company? The deal?" His expression darkened for a moment, then steadied. "I'll face the consequences. I'll lose what I have if it means keeping what I need." And then, before she could react, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't slow or tentative this time. It was fire and surrender. His hand cupped her face, her fingers clutched his collar, and the world melted into gold and thunder. The rain began to fall again, as if the heavens themselves had chosen to bless what logic could not. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, he whispered against her lips, "No, you can tell me to walk away. But don't say it unless you mean it." She looked at him, at the man who had everything yet looked at her, as if she were his everything. And for the first time, she didn't know whether to run or to fall. "I can't promise forever," she said, voice shaking. "Then promise tonight," he replied. And so she did. They stayed there until the lights of dawn began to break, talking, laughing, holding on to something neither of them could name. Beneath the glow of a sleeping city, they stopped being a billionaire and a stranger. They became something deeper, two hearts caught between reality and a fairy tale that neither of them dared to end. But even as the sun rose and painted the sky gold, Amara knew, love born out of secrets could never stay hidden for long. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the world that had created Alexander Steele was already stirring, ready to tear apart the fragile magic they had built. Months passed, seasons changed, but some feelings refused to fade. For Amara Khan, life had become a beautiful contradiction. Every sunrise brought new love, but every sunset carried a shadow of fear. Alexander Steele had changed everything. He had turned her world of quiet routines into one filled with candlelit dinners, whispered promises, and stolen glances that felt like poetry. Yet, beneath the magic, a storm brewed. The tabloids had finally caught on. The mystery woman in Steele's life. One headline read. Another called her the wedding crasher who stole a billionaire's heart. Paparazzi followed her to work. Her phone never stopped ringing. Friends distanced themselves, unable to understand how a simple designer had captured London's most elusive heart. And then came the inevitable. The confrontation. She was sitting in her apartment, sketching, when the doorbell rang. Alexander stood there, rain on his coat, tension in his eyes. "They're threatening to withdraw from the board," he said quietly. "Crawford's family wants an apology. They want me to deny what's between us publicly." Amara's breath caught. "And what will you do?" He didn't answer at first. He simply walked closer, his voice a low murmur. "Tell me what you want me to do." Her heart broke at the softness in his tone. "I want you to protect what you've built. Don't throw it all away for me." He stepped closer, cupping her face. "You think this empire means more than you. You think I can sit in that glass tower knowing I lost the one person who made it feel alive." Tears stung her eyes. "Alexander, please." He silenced her with a kiss. It wasn't desperate, it was deliberate, a vow sealed with warmth and pain all at once. When he pulled away, he whispered, "They can take everything, but they'll never take you." That night, he walked away from everything the world had built for him. Contracts, partnerships, even the inheritance that defined his name. The news erupted the next morning. Alexander Steele resigns as CEO, chooses love over legacy. The media called it madness. Society called it scandal. But for Amara, it was love, pure and terrifying in its depth. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the noise faded. He moved into a quieter world, one with less gold, more truth. And in that stillness he found peace. One evening, as the sun set behind the London skyline, Alexander took her hand and said softly, "Do you remember the ballroom where we met?" She laughed. "How could I forget? I ruined your wedding." He smiled. "No, you rewrote it." Her laughter died when she saw his expression shift, gentle, serious, almost trembling. "Come with me," he said. They arrived at the same grand hall, the Rosemont Hotel. But it looked different this time. No flashing cameras, no glittering crowd, just a long aisle lined with white candles, soft music in the air, and rose petals scattered across the marble floor. Amara froze. "What is this?" He turned to her, holding a small velvet box. "A correction," he whispered. When he opened it, the diamond inside wasn't large or showy. It was simple, elegant, just like her. "Amara Khan," he began, voice low, full of emotion. "You walked into my life by mistake, but I'm asking you to stay by choice. Not as a symbol, not as a story, but as the woman I want to wake up beside for the rest of my life." A tears blurred her vision. "Alexander." He took her hand. "You once said you didn't belong in my world, so I built one where only we exist." She laughed through her tears, trembling. "And what if I walk into the wrong hall again?" He smiled. That slow heart, melting smile she'd come to love. "Then I'll follow you. Every time." The music swelled softly as she nodded, tears glistening like diamonds. "Yes, Alexander Steele. I'll marry you." And for the second time in her life, she walked down that same aisle, but this time not by accident. Her dress was simple, ivory silk that shimmered with each step. The room glowed golden from the candles, and at the altar stood the man who had once been a stranger but was now her forever. As she reached him, he whispered, "You sure you want to marry the man whose wedding you crashed?" She smiled, her voice trembling. "I'm marrying the man who never stopped believing I was meant to." The priest spoke, their vows echoed through the quiet hall. And when Alexander finally kissed her, it wasn't confusion, it wasn't chaos, it was home. Outside, the night breeze carried laughter and music from far away. But inside that candlelit room, time stood still. He lifted her hand, kissing it softly. "You know what the irony is?" "What?" she whispered. "I thought you were the wrong bride." He smiled, eyes glistening. "Turns out, you were the only one that was ever right." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat. Steady, sure, and completely hers. And as the candles flickered, Amara realized something she'd never dared to before. Sometimes, love doesn't come knocking. Sometimes, it waits quietly behind the wrong door, until you walk in by mistake and stay forever by choice. Sometimes destiny doesn't knock politely. It barges into our lives wearing chaos, confusion, and a mistake that changes everything. Amara Khan walked into the wrong wedding, but she walked straight into the right heart. What began as an accident turned into a love story that defied power, pride, and perfection. Alexander Steele, the man who had everything, found the one thing he never knew he needed: a reason to feel. Their love wasn't built on luxury but on longing, not on fairy tales but on truth. She didn't need a crown to belong in his world. She became the reason it finally made sense. In the end, she wasn't the wrong bride. She was the woman destiny had written into his story all along. Morale: sometimes the most beautiful beginnings are hidden inside life's biggest mistakes. This was Veiled Narrative Stories, where love finds its way through fate's sweetest accidents.